Hey guys, and welcome back to The Controversial Mom. I'm your host, Emily Jones. And this week, as always, we're going to be talking about something that is probably a little bit more controversial than normal. We have all been talking about it. We've seen it in the headlines. I know the Right Side 2.0 team have also been talking about it. And it's the recent wins out of New York, Virginia, and New Jersey. And not necessarily that it was just Democratic wins, but it's the flavor of the Democratic Party that won and what that actually means for us here in Alabama. So, the first one I want to talk about is New York City. They elected Zohran Mamdani. I have to focus to even say the name. He is a very open Muslim socialist. He's a very young guy. He's only 34 years old. And despite what he says, the way in which he presents it is very appealing. He's very charismatic. He's weirdo, but he's very charismatic. And I totally understand why young people are at least attracted to hear him speak. I don't agree that they like what he says, but I understand what pulls them in. But he did a couple of things that are extremely concerning, at least for me personally, as we start gearing up for the 2026 elections. The midterms are going to be very, very, very important across the country and here in our state. And legislative session here in Alabama is going to be just as important because it gives us the opportunity to put, in my opinion, some safeguards in place to prevent Alabama from becoming one of these crazy bluish states. So the first thing was I'm going to have to call him Mamdani because I can actually say that word better. The first thing with him is that he promised a lot of free stuff. So most of us know, if you're listening to the show, you undoubtedly understand and agree with me that socialism, communism is bad. Like, people flee these countries for a reason. We in America do not want that. We believe in capitalistic and open markets, and we want to encourage that. Mamdani obviously does not, and he pushes policies and ideas that are very socialistic in principle, because he's a socialist. But what he did was actually kind of brilliant in a way. The economy's not where we need it to be. People are still struggling. And I say that as a single mom with an 11-year-old. And I can't go to the grocery store each week without spending over $100 on basics. And that's simple things like my son's lunch and his snacks for school every day. Obviously, food for us to eat for supper during the week. Like, it's nothing extravagant. And we're in Alabama where we don't have like insanely high cost of living. So if I'm spending $100+ just for me and my 11-year-old, which, I mean, let's be honest, between the two of us, we eat for like one person. If it's costing me that much every single week just for basics, I cannot imagine how difficult it is in these bigger cities for people to afford to live. So while I do not agree with Mamdani's approach and his principles, I understand how a young, struggling single parent out there would be interested in what he's saying. The idea of free stuff attracts anybody's attention. Now, we all know it's not free, but these people don't understand that. They just know that he's offering what all? Free public buses, rent freezes on subsidized housing, city-operated grocery stores, which is ridiculous, but whatever. I mean, he's telling them he's going to control the price of groceries. Like, who wouldn't be interested in that? And universal child care. Oh my gosh, child care is so expensive. Now, I disagree that the government needs to get involved in that and fixing it, but it is what it is. He's offering all these things. As struggling young parents out there, they're going to be interested in what he has to say. And because our public school systems have failed for decades to teach the horrors of communism and socialism, they don't know any better than to believe him. They just think, I'm struggling, I can't make ends meet. This guy's promising me everything I could ever need. Why would I not vote for him? So there's that issue. Then there's the one that really bothers me, and it really needs to bother every single one of us. And it's this pitch that he had around religious and cultural division. So I didn't listen to a whole lot that this guy said for obvious reasons. But the things I did hear were really disturbing. And he made this whole pitch around anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And he had some, personal stories, we'll call them, about how he had experienced, or been a victim, I should say, of Islamophobia in New York City. Well, there's a reason for that, 9/11 being one, but he's made himself into the victim. So when we're looking at New York City, we're looking at Dearborn, Michigan, we're looking at, I can't remember the city name, in Minneapolis, I guess Minneapolis, Minnesota, that's the city, huh? Where we're seeing these huge uprisings of the Muslim community. When you start talking about how everybody in America suffers from Islamophobia, you're starting to appeal to really large masses of people that are obviously going to vote in support of you. Now, that matters here in Alabama. It matters greatly in Texas. It's starting to matter more here in Alabama because we're seeing more of that community build up. If you listen to Brian Dawson's podcast, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, he even talked about it, how he was approached from a local Muslim girl talking about how she wanted to give money to 1819 News. There's people within the Republican Party here in our state that are talking about how there's more of a Muslim presence in the ALGOP, whatever you want to call it, than there ever has been. So it's a growing community in our state. And yet we're sitting here thinking, well, what's happening in New York will never impact us here in Alabama. Well, it certainly will, and it already is. You don't have to go far to find the parallels in these stories. So what he's talking about with people suffering from Islamophobia are very much in our backyards. There is a community growing up. There are a lot of people that are concerned about this, myself included. So when you start appealing to a community based on these religious fears, you're going to gain a lot more momentum than we're giving them credit for. And we here in Alabama need to be very much aware of that. Now, the other big thing with Mamdani is he's not even a U.S. born citizen. He was born in Uganda. I had forgotten that. And all of the things that I've read about him recently, I've kind of forgotten that he was born in Uganda. And that will be important here in a minute when I start talking about the specifics here in Alabama and things we need to be doing to prevent all of these Democratic wins in other states from coming to Alabama. The other big one that really has not gotten a lot of attention, and I'm going to mess up this name so terribly, so I apologize. Ghazala Hashma? I'm not really sure how to say that. I'm horrible with stuff like this. But she is the newly elected Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. She, too, was not born in the U.S. She was born in India, moved here as a child. And she is the first Muslim to win a statewide race in Virginia. So we're starting to see a trend. You had the case in Minneapolis where a Muslim ran for mayor, I think it was. He did not win. But still, we're seeing a trend. And if you watched my episode from a couple of weeks ago where I talked about, and Charlie Kirk talked about this a lot, there's a growing number of people that are talking about it, the Islamic takeover of our country. In Islam, they do not see any separation from church and state. Whereas for us that are, capitalists, we believe in the Constitution, the founding documents. Like, we believe there's some level of separation between church and state. Muslims do not believe that. And when you start looking at what's happening with people running for office, you start seeing that play out before your very eyes. So this was the other Muslim that won an elected seat, a very high level ranking seat in our country. Other wins that are not Muslim related, but are Democratic wins was, I guess that's Mikey Cheryl. I don't really know how you say her first name. But she won the new governor's race in New Jersey, or the governor's race in New Jersey, rather. The key thing with her that's concerning, not necessarily concerning, but just something that caught my attention. She won against a Trump-endorsed opponent. And that was the big thing that she ran on, was she's the anti-Trump candidate. So everything that Trump's doing, basically, she's saying, I'm going to do the opposite in our state. And she's really playing off the issues in the economy and the things that New Jersey needs to do differently to kind of offset what's going on with Trump. The other wins that I can't find on my notes, but I have them in my head. I won't have the names. But also in Virginia, the governor's race went to a Democrat. and the attorney general went to a Democrat. Now, the attorney general race was definitely one we all paid attention to because that was Jay Jones, who's the one whose, I guess, phone got hacked. I don't know. His text messages got out where he was talking about how he wished that his opponent would die, and he fantasized about some very horrific things dealing with the death of his children. So that's who they've elected in Virginia, from attorney general, lieutenant governor, and governor, all Democrats. New Jersey governor, Democrat. New York City mayor, Democrat. So my point in highlighting all of those is really that they were major Democratic wins. Now, that's a major problem for us, even here in very red Alabama, because it's emboldening Democrats to go hard in 2026. The governor, I think it is, of Kansas is like the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. And she basically said these wins, specifically in Virginia, are the blueprint for how Democrats win in 2026. So they're very focused on 26 and how they take a lot of these seats from Republicans. The economy's not where it needs to be. Trump's not delivered on his promises. Now, we can debate why he hasn't. I personally don't think that's a Trump issue. I think it's an issue with our Senate and our House, but hey, whatever. Doesn't matter. He's not delivered on it. And if you're not deeply involved in politics, you don't understand that. You just know that Trump promised all these things and he's not done it. So Democrats have something to run on in 26. Now we've got government shutdown. They're going to use that to their advantage. They just did. They'll continue to use it. So we've got to start thinking as conservative Republicans what we can do to help get us prepared to maintain our seats and win new ones in 2026. Beyond that, Alabama really needs to consider what's about to happen. You're about to have massive amounts of people getting out of New York City because of Mamdani and what he's about to do. You're probably going to have people getting out of Virginia because of their governor, lieutenant governor, and AG. It's going to be horrible what they do to these states. And people are going to be getting out and going to red states where they're, air quotes, safe from all of this nonsense. So the fear is these people leave those states and they move to Alabama. Well, like most people, they don't leave their politics behind. They don't change the way they vote just because they're in a new state. They're going to continue to vote for what they've always voted for. It's what happens, right? So what we need to be focused on during our legislative session and our elections, our state elections, is ensuring that we vote for hardcore conservatives that are going to go in and do the bold things in passing hardcore conservative legislation. Now, there was legislation, I believe, filed, maybe there's just talk of it, of filing legislation that says only American-born citizens can hold elected positions in the state. That would prevent some of this craziness that we're seeing, like with Mamdani and the lady out of Virginia, I've already forgotten her name, the lieutenant governor. It would prevent situations like that. But what we also need to be doing is passing hardcore legislation that prevents all of this woke ideology into our state. Now, why do I say that? Because if Alabama is viewed as a very conservative state with very strict conservative laws, it deters these liberal people from even coming here. Now, we can't prevent them from coming despite, what Greg Abbott jokes around with. He's going to put tariffs on people from moving in. We can't really do that. So what we can do is deter these crazy liberals from moving to our state by having really strong laws in place that make them go, yeah, I'm not so interested in living there. So that's what we've got to focus on. We've got to make sure that our schools are extremely ideologically protected from any of these radical ideas and agendas. We've got to make sure that we don't allow men in women's bathrooms. I saw a video this week of a news article from DeKalb County, Georgia, where a man, and it is very much a man, just wearing women's dresses, is going to the bathroom of a public library. Like, that's just right across the state line. That's not far from us. We need to get laws in place that prevent that nonsense from happening here. We need to make sure that we've got everything buckled down so that people that are fleeing those areas only look to come to Alabama if they truly want to be a part of a very conservative state. So 2026 is only a couple of weeks away. It's not far. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to make sure we're getting extremely good candidates elected into these positions. Obviously, presumably, Tuberville's going to win governor. So that's a big first step. But we've got lieutenant governor, we've got AG, we've got state auditor, secretary of state, school boards. We got everything on the ballot. We've got a ton of stuff that we've got to make sure we're voting for hardcore conservatives in all of these positions. And then you've got a ton of your local or your state level Senate and House seats that are also up for election. So we've got to make sure we're voting for the right people in those positions and make sure that the ones that we do vote for are ones that are carrying really strong legislation year after year. They can't get a pass of, oh, it's election year, I'll file something really good that year and do nothing the other 3. Nope. They have to be committed all 4 years to doing the right thing. Filing legislation and then voting for legislation that their counterparts file. So those are things we've got to do in just a very short amount of time. So as always, if you do not know who's running, make sure you look them up, go learn about them, ask questions, know who you're voting for. And then look at all of these crazy states that have elected all these Democrats and figure out what are good pieces of legislation that we can file to strengthen the conservative values in our state that would deter all these escapees from coming to Alabama and flipping our area blue. And I say that as someone who lives in Madison, and I can tell you firsthand, we are a very purple county. I cannot tell you how many people I see wearing or hanging flags that align with radical ideologies. So if you're in Madison, you totally know what I'm talking about. It's happening, and we need to take very proactive measures to stop it where it is and then regain the ground that we've lost when it comes to conserving the conservative values of our communities. So as always, guys, thank you for joining me. If you have questions, comments, any of the above, reach out, let me know. Y'all know that I love this stuff, so I can talk about it all day long, and I love having someone to talk back to. So reach out with anything you've got. Thanks for joining, guys. I'll see you next week.